The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine sat quietly in her private dressing room, staring at her reflection in the antique mirror. Her fingers traced the smooth surface of a simple pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, Mary. Today was different. Today, she would make a decision that would change everything. For months, the media had been relentless in their criticism. Every public appearance brought harsh comments about her fashion choices, her jewelry selections, and what they called her safe style. The tabloids seemed to take pleasure in comparing her unfavorably to other royal women, both past and present. Catherine had tried to ignore the noise, but the constant scrutiny was wearing her down. "Ma'am, your stylist is here," announced Sophie, her lady-in-waiting, gently knocking on the door. Catherine took a deep breath and smoothed her silk robe. "Please, send her in." Emma Harrison entered the room with her usual bright smile, carrying several jewelry boxes and fabric samples. She had been working with Catherine for 3 years now, and had become more than just a stylist. She was a trusted friend who understood the pressures of royal life. "Good morning, Catherine," Emma said warmly, setting down her materials. "Ready for today's engagement?" Catherine turned away from a mirror, her expression troubled. "Emma, can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course. Do you think I'm boring?" "Fashion-wise, I mean." Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. "The papers keep saying I play it too safe, that I lack personality in my choices." Emma sat down in the chair beside Catherine, her face filled with compassion. "Catherine, you're many things, but boring is not one of them. You have your own style, and there's nothing wrong with elegance and grace." "But maybe they're right," Catherine continued, her hands fidgeting with the pearl necklace. "Maybe I'm too careful. Maybe I'm not honoring the position I hold by being more bold." This conversation had been building for weeks. Catherine had been increasingly withdrawn, spending hours looking through old photographs of royal women who had made strong fashion statements. She admired their confidence, their willingness to take risks, their ability to use clothing and jewelry as a form of self-expression. Emma noticed the collection of photographs scattered across Catherine's dressing table. Images of Queen Elizabeth's magnificent brooches, Princess Margaret's glamorous evening jewelry, and even some contemporary pieces worn by other royal women around the world. "What's really bothering you?" Emma asked gently. Catherine stood up and walked to her jewelry collection, which was housed in a series of elegant wooden boxes. "Look at all of this," she said, gesturing to the impressive array. "These pieces have so much history, so much meaning. But I feel like I'm not doing them justice. I choose the same safe options over and over again." She opened one of the larger boxes, revealing a stunning emerald and diamond tiara that had belonged to Princess Diana. Catherine had worn it only once, to a state dinner 2 years ago. "This belonged to William's mother," she said softly. "When I wear her jewelry, I feel this enormous responsibility. But I also feel disconnected from my own story." Emma listened carefully, understanding that this was about much more than jewelry. This was about Catherine finding her own identity within the constraints of royal tradition, about honoring the past while creating her own legacy. "Have you talked to William about this?" Emma asked. Catherine shook her head. "He has so much on his plate. Besides, he always tells me I look beautiful no matter what I wear." "But that's not the point, is it? This isn't about looking beautiful. It's about meaning. Purpose." The phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was a reminder that Catherine had a charity engagement in 2 hours, a visit to a children's hospital that she had been looking forward to for weeks. This particular visit was special because it was to open a new wing funded partly by a charity auction where several pieces of royal jewelry had been donated. As Catherine prepared for the engagement, she found herself staring at a particular piece in her collection, a delicate sapphire bracelet that had been a wedding gift from her parents. It was beautiful, but modest compared to some of the grand pieces she owned. Yet every time she looked at it, she felt a connection to her own family, her own story before she became a royal. "Emma," Catherine said suddenly, "what if we did something different today?" "What do you mean?" Catherine's eyes were beginning to sparkle with an idea that was forming. What if, instead of choosing jewelry based on what's expected or what's safe, I chose pieces that tell a story? My story. Emma's interest was piqued. Go on. This hospital visit, it's about children, about hope, about healing. What if I wore pieces that reflect that? Not the grandest or most expensive, but the most meaningful. Catherine began pulling different pieces from her collection, her movements becoming more animated as her idea developed. She selected her grandmother's pearl necklace, the sapphire bracelet from her parents, and a small diamond brooch that had been given to her by a children's charity in recognition of her work. These pieces, she said, laying them out on her dressing table, they're not the most impressive in terms of value, but they each represent something important to me. Family, love, service. Emma smiled, recognizing the passion returning to Catherine's voice. I think that's beautiful, but are you sure you're ready for the potential criticism? You know how the media can be. Catherine paused, considering Emma's question seriously. I've been thinking about that, she admitted. For so long, I've been trying to avoid criticism by playing it safe. But maybe the real mistake is letting fear of judgment dictate my choices. She picked up a photograph of Princess Diana from her dressing table. William's mother faced constant scrutiny about her fashion choices, but she never let it stop her from expressing herself. She used her platform to draw attention to causes she cared about, and her jewelry was part of that story. The more Catherine talked, the clearer her vision became. She began to see her jewelry collection not just as beautiful objects, but as tools for communication, ways to honor her past while building her future. There's something else, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger. I've been thinking about starting something new. What if I created a signature collection? Not just for special occasions, but pieces that represent different aspects of my work, my values, my journey. Emma leaned forward, intrigued. What would that look like? Catherine's mind was racing now. I could commission pieces that reflect my patronages. Something for my work with children, something for mental health awareness, something that honors my family. And I could wear them strategically, using each public appearance as an opportunity to tell a deeper story. The idea was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of simply choosing jewelry to complement her outfit, Catherine would select pieces that carried symbolic meaning, that could start conversations about the causes she supported. But I wouldn't want it to be obvious, Catherine continued, warming to her theme. The pieces would have to be beautiful in their own right. The symbolism would be subtle, something that people could discover if they looked closer, but not so obvious that it felt contrived. Emma was getting excited about the possibilities. You could work with different designers, maybe even some up-and-coming artists. It could be a way to support British craftsmanship while creating something uniquely yours. Catherine nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And some pieces could incorporate elements that have personal meaning. Maybe stones from William's family collection reset in new ways, or new pieces that complement existing ones. As they continued to discuss the idea, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months, excitement about her public role. Instead of dreading the scrutiny her choices would receive, she was beginning to look forward to the conversations they might inspire. The Children's Hospital today, Catherine said, looking at the 3 pieces she had selected. This could be the beginning. These pieces represent foundation, family, heritage, service. They're the perfect starting point. Emma helped Catherine put on the jewelry, and as each piece found its place, Catherine felt a shift in her confidence. The pearl necklace felt like an anchor to her roots, the sapphire bracelet like a promise to never forget where she came from, and the charity brooch like a commitment to use her position for good. Looking in the mirror, Catherine saw something different than she had that morning. The same elegant woman was there, but now there was purpose in her appearance, intention in her choices. How do you feel? Emma asked. Catherine smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. I feel like myself again, but also like I'm becoming someone new. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Catherine made a mental note to call her secretary later to schedule meetings with jewelry designers and artisans. The signature collection was no longer just an idea, it was a mission. The drive to the children's hospital gave Catherine time to think about what she was embarking on. Creating a signature collection would be more than a fashion statement. It would be a way to redefine her role, to find her own voice within the tradition she respected. She thought about the children she was about to meet, many of whom were facing challenges that would require tremendous courage. If they could be brave in the face of uncertainty, surely she could be brave enough to express herself authentically. As the car pulled up to the hospital, Catherine touched each piece of jewelry she was wearing, drawing strength from their personal significance. Today was the first day of a new chapter, one where she would use her platform not just to look appropriate, but to communicate values, to tell stories, and to connect with people on a deeper level. The photographers were waiting, as always, and Catherine knew that by tomorrow, images of her appearance would be analyzed and critiqued across the media. But for the first time in months, she didn't care about the potential criticism. She cared about the children she was about to meet, the message she wanted to send, and the authentic way she had chosen to present herself. Standing outside the hospital entrance, Catherine felt a surge of confidence that had been missing for too long. This wasn't about rebelling against tradition or trying to shock anyone. This was about finding a way to honor her position while remaining true to herself, about using the privilege of visibility for something meaningful. As she walked toward the entrance, her jewelry catching the light of camera flashes, Catherine knew that her relationship with these precious objects would never be the same. They were no longer just accessories. They were partners in her mission to make a difference. The hospital doors opened, and Catherine stepped forward into her new role as a woman who wore her values as clearly as she wore her jewelry, ready to show the world that authenticity and duty could exist beautifully together. 3 weeks after her transformative hospital visit, Catherine sat in her private office at Kensington Palace, surrounded by sketches, gemstone samples, and photographs of potential collaborators. The response to her subtly meaningful jewelry choices had been overwhelmingly positive, with fashion magazines praising her new sophistication and royal watchers noting the deeper symbolism in her selections. More importantly, the children at the hospital had noticed too. One young patient, 7-year-old Lily, had asked about Catherine's Pretty Star pin, the charity brooch, and when Catherine explained that it represented helping children like her, Lily's face had lit up with understanding. That moment had convinced Catherine that she was on the right path. Her personal assistant, James, knocked and entered with a stack of correspondence. "Ma'am, we've received responses from all the designers you wanted to meet with. Everyone is available for consultations next week." Catherine looked up from a particularly beautiful sketch of a pendant design inspired by forget-me-nots, the flowers associated with her mental health awareness work. Wonderful. And the meeting with the Queen's jeweler? Scheduled for Friday afternoon. He's bringing some historical pieces you might want to incorporate into new designs. The project had grown beyond Catherine's original vision. What started as a desire to be more authentic in her jewelry choices had evolved into a comprehensive plan to create a signature collection that would serve multiple purposes, supporting British artisans, raising awareness for her patronages, and establishing a new model for how royal jewelry could be both beautiful and meaningful. William had been incredibly supportive when she finally shared her plans with him. "It's brilliant," he had said, holding her hands as they sat in their private sitting room. "Mother would have loved this idea. Using your platform to tell stories, to connect with people, that's exactly what she believed in." That conversation had meant everything to Catherine. She had been worried that William might see her project as frivolous or attention-seeking, but instead, he understood it as a continuation of Princess Diana's legacy of using fashion as a form of communication. The knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." To her surprise, it was Queen Camilla, carrying a small leather jewelry case. The Queen Consort had requested this private meeting, and Catherine had wondered what it might be about. "Catherine, dear," Camilla said warmly, settling into the chair across from Catherine's desk. "I hope you don't mind the interruption. I wanted to talk to you about your jewelry project." Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness. "Of course, Your Majesty. I hope I haven't overstepped any boundaries." Camilla laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "Quite the opposite. I think what you're doing is wonderful. In fact, I wanted to share something with you." She opened the jewelry case, revealing a stunning aquamarine and diamond necklace that Catherine had never seen before. The design was modern yet timeless, with clean lines that somehow managed to be both bold and elegant. This was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II in the 1970s, Camilla explained. She had very specific ideas about what she wanted, and she worked closely with the designer to ensure every element had meaning. The aquamarines represented calm and clarity, qualities she felt were essential for leadership. Catherine leaned forward, studying the exquisite piece. "It's beautiful, but why are you showing me this?" "Because," Camilla said, "the late queen understood what you're discovering now. That jewelry, especially royal jewelry, is never just about adornment. It's about communication, about values, about the stories we want to tell." She carefully lifted the necklace from its case. This piece was never photographed for the official collection catalogs. The queen considered it too personal, too revealing of her inner thoughts about leadership. But she wore it to every meeting she had with world leaders during some of the most challenging periods of her reign. The revelation took Catherine's breath away. "I had no idea Her late Majesty thought about jewelry that way." Oh, she absolutely did. Every piece in the crown jewels, every brooch she chose for state occasions, every necklace she selected for private dinners, they were all carefully considered. She believed that as symbols of continuity and tradition, we have a responsibility to make our choices meaningful. Camilla placed the necklace back in its case and slid it across the desk to Catherine. She left instructions that this should be given to you when you were ready to understand its significance. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I can't accept this. It's too precious, too important." "It's not a gift," Camilla said gently. "It's a responsibility." The queen believed that one day you would need a piece that represented your commitment to thoughtful leadership. She wanted you to have something that embodied the values you're now choosing to express through your collection. The weight of this revelation settled over Catherine. Queen Elizabeth II had not only approved of the approach Catherine was now taking, but had actually anticipated it, preparing this meaningful gift for the exact moment when Catherine would be ready to receive it. "There's something else," Camilla continued. The queen left detailed notes about each piece in the collection, not just their history, but her thoughts about their meaning, their appropriate use, their symbolic value. "I think these insights might help guide your own project." Catherine was overwhelmed by the generosity and foresight of the late queen. How did she know? How did she anticipate that I would want to do something like this? Camilla smiled knowingly. She was remarkably perceptive about people. She saw your intelligence, your compassion, your desire to serve meaningfully. She also understood that each generation needs to find their own way to honor tradition while expressing their authentic selves. This meeting was reshaping Catherine's understanding of her project. What she had thought was a departure from royal tradition was actually a continuation of it, a carrying forward of Queen Elizabeth's own thoughtful approach to using jewelry as a form of communication. The aquamarine necklace, Camilla explained, was designed to be worn with specific intentions. The queen wore it when she needed to project calm authority, when she was dealing with particularly difficult situations that required both strength and diplomacy. Catherine studied the piece again, noticing details she had missed before. The way the aquamarines were cut to catch light from multiple angles, creating an almost hypnotic effect. The diamonds were placed not just for beauty, but to create a sense of movement, of dynamic energy. Your project, Camilla said, is an opportunity to continue this tradition, to create pieces that future generations of royal women can wear with the same intention and meaning. The conversation shifted to practical matters as Camilla shared insights about working with jewelers, about commissioning pieces that would stand the test of time, about ensuring that each element of a design served both aesthetic and symbolic purposes. The key, Camilla explained, is subtlety. The meaning should be there for those who look for it, but the pieces must be beautiful enough to stand on their own merits. Queen Elizabeth always said that if you have to explain the symbolism, you haven't designed it correctly. As their meeting concluded, Catherine felt a profound shift in her understanding of what she was undertaking. This wasn't just a personal project or even a fashion statement. It was a continuation of a royal tradition of using jewelry to communicate values, to provide comfort and strength to the wearer, and to connect with the public on a deeper level. That evening, Catherine shared the day's revelations with William. They sat together in their private sitting room, the aquamarine necklace displayed on the coffee table between them, catching the light from the fireplace. "I keep thinking about what your grandmother understood," Catherine said, curled up beside William on the sofa. "That jewelry isn't separate from our duties. It's part of them." William nodded, his arm around his wife. She always said that every choice we make in public send a message. She wanted to make sure those messages were intentional. "The designers I'm meeting with next week," Catherine continued, "I want to share this perspective with them. I want them to understand that we're not just creating beautiful jewelry. We're creating tools for communication, for comfort, for connection." They spent the evening looking through the notes Queen Elizabeth had left about various pieces in the royal collection. Each page revealed new insights into the late Queen's thoughtful approach to jewelry selection. She had considered everything: the historical significance of certain stones, the psychological impact of different colors, the symbolic meaning of various designs. One note particularly struck Catherine. It was about a simple pearl brooch that Queen Elizabeth had worn to many private meetings with grieving families. "Pearls," the note read, "represent tears transformed into beauty through time and patience. When people are suffering, I want them to see that pain can become something meaningful, something that adds to rather than diminishes our humanity." She thought about everything. Catherine marveled, reading through more of the notes. "She did," William agreed. "And now you're carrying that forward in your own way." The next morning, Catherine met with her first designer consultation. Sarah Chun was a young British-Chinese jeweler whose work Catherine had admired for its modern aesthetic combined with traditional craftsmanship techniques. Sarah arrived at Kensington Palace with a portfolio of her work and an obvious case of nerves. "Ms. Chun," Catherine said warmly, greeting her in the reception room, "thank you so much for coming. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Sarah's nervousness began to ease as Catherine explained her vision for the signature collection. "I'm not looking for jewelry that will make headlines," Catherine said. "I'm looking for pieces that will start conversations, that will carry meaning, that will connect with people's hearts." They spent 3 hours together, with Sarah sketching ideas as Catherine shared her thoughts about each of her major patronages. For children's charities, they discussed incorporating elements that represented growth, hope, and protection. For mental health awareness, they explored designs that conveyed healing, strength, and renewal. "What about sustainability?" Sarah asked. "I know environmental causes are important to you. We could use ethically sourced stones, recycled metals, maybe even incorporate elements from existing pieces to represent continuity and renewal." Catherine's eyes lit up. "That's perfect, and it fits with the tradition Queen Elizabeth started of having pieces redesigned and updated for new purposes." By the end of their meeting, they had outlined concepts for 5 initial pieces: a pendant for children's work, earrings representing mental health awareness, a bracelet celebrating environmental sustainability, a brooch honoring military families, and a ring symbolizing the importance of early childhood development. Each piece would be designed to be worn in multiple ways. The pendant could be a necklace or a brooch. The earrings could be worn with or without additional elements. The bracelet could be adjusted for different occasions. This versatility was important to Catherine, who wanted to be able to adapt her jewelry choices to the tone and formality of different events. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Your Royal Highness, can I say something?" "Of course. When I started designing jewelry, I always hoped my work would matter, that it would be more than just pretty objects. What you're doing, using jewelry to tell stories, to advocate for causes, It's exactly what I dreamed of when I chose this career. That afternoon, Catherine had similar conversations with three other designers, each bringing their own perspective and expertise. A traditional British jeweler who specialized in incorporating vintage elements into modern designs. A young designer who worked primarily with sustainable and ethically sourced materials. An artist who created contemporary pieces inspired by historical techniques. Each meeting reinforced Catherine's belief that she was on the right path. These artists understood that what they were creating together would be more than beautiful jewelry. It would be a new way of thinking about how royal responsibilities could be expressed through personal choices. That evening, as Catherine recorded her thoughts about each consultation in her private journal, she reflected on how much her perspective had changed since that morning 3 weeks ago when she had sat in front of her mirror, feeling disconnected from her jewelry collection. Now, each piece in her collection had potential. The diamond tiara that had intimidated her could be paired with modern elements to represent the balance between tradition and progress. The emerald necklace that had felt too grand could be worn with simpler pieces to create a message about accessible elegance. Most importantly, Catherine no longer felt burdened by the weight of expectation that came with wearing historically significant jewelry. Instead, she felt empowered by the opportunity to add her own chapter to the story those pieces told, to ensure that their meaning continued to evolve and remain relevant. As she prepared for bed, Catherine looked once more at the aquamarine necklace Queen Elizabeth had left for her. Tomorrow, she would wear it to her next engagement, carrying forward the late Queen's legacy of thoughtful, meaningful jewelry choices while adding her own voice to the conversation. The project that had begun as a desire for authenticity had become something much larger, a bridge between past and future, a way of honoring tradition while embracing innovation, and a tool for connecting with people on the deepest level. 6 months into her signature jewelry project, Catherine stood before a full-length mirror in her dressing room, wearing the first completed piece from her new collection. The pendant, designed in collaboration with Sarah Chun, hung gracefully from a delicate chain, its surface catching the morning light. The piece incorporated 3 small diamonds from one of Princess Diana's brooches, reset within a contemporary design that resembled a stylized tree, representing growth, hope, and the interconnected nature of human relationships. Today marked a significant milestone. Catherine would be wearing the pendant to the official opening of a new children's mental health facility, an event that represented the convergence of 2 of her most passionate causes. The symbolism felt perfect, but she couldn't help feeling nervous about the public debut of her first custom piece. Emma entered the room with Catherine's final accessories for the day. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked, noting Catherine's contemplative expression. "Excited and terrified in equal measure," Catherine admitted, touching the pendant gently. "This feels like such a personal piece to share with the world. What if people don't understand? What if they think it's frivolous or self-indulgent?" Emma moved to stand beside Catherine, both women looking at their reflection in the mirror. "Do you remember what Queen Camilla told you? That Queen Elizabeth believed if you have to explain the symbolism, you haven't designed it correctly." Catherine nodded, taking comfort in the reminder. "This piece is beautiful on its own merits," Emma continued. "The fact that it carries deeper meaning for those who look for it doesn't make it any less stunning as pure craftsmanship. You're not asking people to understand every layer of significance. You're offering them the opportunity to discover it if they choose to." As they finished Catherine's preparations, her private secretary knocked with an update on the day's schedule. "Ma'am, there's been an interesting development. The design team at the children's facility has requested permission to create a small display about the significance of jewelry in royal history, specifically focusing on pieces that have supported charitable causes. They'd like to include some information about your new collection approach, if you're comfortable with that." Catherine felt a flutter of surprise and pride. "They want to discuss the collection?" "Yes, ma'am. Apparently, news of your collaboration with British designers has generated quite a bit of interest. Several fashion and history museums have inquired about potential exhibitions exploring how royal jewelry has evolved to reflect changing social values. This was more attention than Catherine had anticipated, but she realized it aligned perfectly with her goals. If her approach could inspire broader conversations about the intersection of tradition and modern values, about the responsibility that comes with public platforms, then the project was achieving even more than she had hoped. The drive to the children's facility gave Catherine time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The past 6 months have been filled with design meetings, gemstone selections, and countless decisions about how to balance beauty with meaning. But they had also been filled with some of the most fulfilling work of her royal career. Each collaboration had taught her something new about craftsmanship, about the dedication required to create something both beautiful and meaningful. Working with Sarah Chun on the children's pendant had introduced her to traditional Chinese jade working techniques that Sarah had adapted for working with diamonds. Learning about sustainable gemstone sourcing for her environmental awareness pieces had connected her with artisan miners whose families had been working the same deposits for generations. Most importantly, the project had changed how Catherine thought about her role. She no longer felt like someone who simply wore historically significant jewelry. She felt like an active participant in creating the next chapter of that history. The car pulled up to the children's facility, and Catherine could see the small crowd that had gathered. As always, there were photographers and reporters, but she also noticed many families with children, facility staff, and what appeared to be representatives from other children's organizations. As Catherine stepped out of the car, she was immediately aware of the attention focused on her pendant. The photographer's cameras seemed to zero in on the piece, and she could hear whispered conversations among the reporters about new royal jewelry and modern design. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the facility director, greeted Catherine at the entrance. "Your Royal Highness, welcome. We're so honored to have you here for our opening." As they walked through the facility, Catherine was struck by the thoughtful design of the spaces. Everything had been created with children's psychological well-being in mind. Soft colors, natural light, comfortable furniture that was beautiful, but not intimidating. The design philosophy here, Dr. Mitchell explained, is based on the idea that our environment communicates values. We wanted every element to send messages of safety, hope, and dignity. Catherine touched her pendant unconsciously. That's exactly what I've been thinking about with jewelry choices. How everything we wear sends a message, and we have the opportunity to make those messages intentional and positive. During the facility tour, Catherine met with several young patients and their families. 10-year-old Marcus, who was receiving treatment for anxiety, immediately noticed her pendant. "That's really pretty," he said. "It looks like a tree." "Thank you, Marcus. It is meant to represent a tree. Do you know why trees might be important symbols?" Marcus thought for a moment. Because they grow, and because they have roots that keep them strong. Catherine smiled, delighted by his insight. Exactly. Trees also provide shelter and comfort for others, and they're connected to each other through their root systems. They remind us that we're all connected and that we can support each other through difficult times. This exchange was exactly what Catherine had hoped for when she envisioned her signature collection. The jewelry had become a conversation starter, a way to connect with people about values and ideas that mattered. Later, during the formal opening ceremony, Catherine gave a speech about the importance of mental health support for children. As she spoke, she was conscious of her pendant catching the light, and she noticed several people in the audience looking at it with obvious curiosity. When we invest in facilities like this, Catherine said, we're investing in hope. We're saying that every child deserves support, understanding, and the opportunity to flourish. We're also acknowledging that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. After the ceremony, Catherine was approached by Margaret Foster, a journalist from a respected women's magazine. Your Royal Highness, I wonder if I might ask you about your pendant. It's quite striking, and I understand it's part of a new approach to your jewelry selections. Catherine had anticipated this question and had thought carefully about how to respond. The piece is a collaboration with British designer Sarah Chun, she said. I've been working with several talented artisans to create jewelry that reflects the causes I support. This particular piece incorporates elements that represent growth, connection, and resilience, values that I think are particularly relevant when we talk about children's mental health. Margaret's eyes lit up with understanding. So your jewelry choices are becoming more intentional. I would say they're becoming more personal, Catherine replied carefully. I've always believed that when you have a public platform, every choice you make is an opportunity to communicate values. I wanted my jewelry to reflect the things I care about most deeply. That evening, back at Kensington Palace, Catherine and William reviewed the day's events. Photos from the facility opening were already appearing online, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Look at this, William said, showing Catherine an article on his phone. They're calling it the new royal jewelry diplomacy. And this comment thread, people are talking about the symbolism, about what it means to use fashion as a form of advocacy. Catherine read through some of the responses with amazement. People weren't just commenting on whether they liked the pendant. They were discussing the causes it represented, sharing their own experiences with children's mental health, and expressing appreciation for what they saw as a more accessible approach to royal jewelry. There's something else, William continued, scrolling through more coverage. Several other designers have posted about wanting to create pieces that support charitable causes. Your approach seems to be inspiring a broader movement. This was an outcome Catherine hadn't anticipated, but found deeply gratifying. The idea that her personal journey toward more meaningful jewelry choices could inspire others to think differently about the relationship between fashion and advocacy felt like validation of everything she had hoped to achieve. Over the following weeks, Catherine received invitations to collaborate with jewelry designers around the Commonwealth, requests from museums to discuss the evolution of royal jewelry symbolism, and letters from members of the public sharing their own stories about how meaningful objects had helped them through difficult times. One letter particularly moved her. It was from a teenage girl named Emma who had been struggling with depression. She wrote, "When I saw your pendant and read about what it represents, I decided to ask my grandmother for a necklace that belonged to my great-grandmother. When I wear it, I feel connected to all the strong women in my family, and it reminds me that I can be strong too." These responses reinforce Catherine's belief that jewelry could be much more than decoration. When pieces carried meaning, when they told stories, when they connected people to values and relationships they treasured, they became sources of strength and comfort. The success of a children's pendant led to accelerated work on other pieces in the collection. Catherine found herself energized by the creative process, by the conversations with designers, and by the opportunity to support British craftsmanship while advancing causes she cared about. Her collaboration with the Environmental Awareness Earrings had introduced her to innovative techniques for using recycled precious metals and ethically sourced gemstones. The designer, Tom Richardson, had a background in sustainable jewelry making and had taught Catherine about the environmental impact of traditional jewelry production. When you choose to wear recycled gold, Tom explained during one of their design meetings, you're making a statement about circular economy principles. When you select gemstones from mines with fair labor practices, you're supporting ethical business practices. Every element of a piece can reflect your values. This perspective had expanded Catherine's thinking about her collection beyond symbolism and aesthetics to include ethical considerations. She began to see each piece as an opportunity to model responsible consumption, to show that luxury and sustainability could coexist. The environmental earrings, when completed, would feature small emeralds from recycled jewelry, set in gold that had been reclaimed from electronic waste. The design would be inspired by leaf patterns, but simplified to reflect modern aesthetic sensibilities. Catherine planned to wear them to environmental events, but also to other engagements, trusting that people who were interested would discover their significance. As Catherine prepared for bed one evening, She looked through photographs from the children's facility opening. In every image where her pendant was visible, she could see how it had caught the light, how it had drawn attention without overwhelming her overall appearance. But more importantly, she could see in her own face a confidence and authenticity that had been missing for months before she began this project. She looked like someone who was comfortable with her choices, someone who understood her purpose. Emma knocked softly and entered with the next day's schedule. "Ma'am, tomorrow's museum opening. Have you decided which pieces you'd like to wear?" Catherine smiled, already knowing her answer. Tomorrow would mark the debut of the second piece in her signature collection, a brooch designed to honor military families. The piece incorporated sapphires in a design inspired by forget-me-nots, representing remembrance, faithful love, and the enduring connections that sustain families through separation and loss. "The military family's brooch," Catherine said without hesitation. "It's time for its first public appearance." As Emma made notes about the styling for tomorrow's engagement, Catherine felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness she had experienced before wearing the children's pendant. But underneath those feelings was a deeper sense of rightness, of alignment between her personal values and her public choices. The signature collection was becoming more than a jewelry project. It was becoming a new way of thinking about royal service, about how to use privilege and visibility to create meaningful connections with people and causes. Each piece was a commitment, a promise to continue advocating for the values it represented. Looking ahead, Catherine could envision a future where her jewelry collection told the complete story of her royal service, where each piece represented not just a beautiful object, but a chapter in her ongoing commitment to make a difference in the world. 1 year after Catherine first wore her children's pendant, she stood in the newly opened Royal Jewelry Heritage Center, surrounded by displays that told the complete story of her signature collection journey. The center, housed in a beautifully restored Georgian building near Windsor Castle, had been established to showcase how royal jewelry traditions had evolved to meet contemporary challenges and values. The exhibition, titled Jewelry with Purpose, a Modern Royal Collection, featured not only Catherine's pieces but also historical examples of royals who had used jewelry to communicate values and support causes. Queen Elizabeth's meaningful selections were displayed alongside Queen Victoria's mourning jewelry, Queen Mary's adaptable pieces, and Princess Diana's charitable auction pieces. Catherine moved slowly through the exhibition, accompanied by the center's curator, Dr. Helen Wright, who had become a close collaborator over the past year. "The response has exceeded all our expectations," Dr. Wright said, stopping before a display case containing the children's pendant, now shown alongside photographs for various engagements where Catherine had worn it. "Look at this," Dr. Wright continued, indicating a series of panels that displayed letters and messages from the public. "People from around the world have written about how your approach to jewelry has influenced their own relationships with meaningful objects. We've received photos of family heirloom pieces that people have started wearing again, stories about commissioning memorial jewelry, even accounts of young people saving money to buy their first meaningful piece rather than just fashionable jewelry." Catherine read through some of the messages, her eyes filling with tears. A mother from Scotland had written about wearing her grandmother's ring to her daughter's graduation, feeling connected to generations of strong women in her family. A young man from Australia had described commissioning a pendant incorporating his late father's wedding ring, creating a piece that helped him feel his father's presence during important moments. They're creating their own signature collections, Catherine realized, using jewelry the way we intended, as connection, as comfort, as communication. The center had become more than a museum. It had become a catalyst for a broader conversation about the relationship between objects and meaning, about how personal choices could reflect values and create connections. Catherine's own collection had grown to include 12 pieces, each representing a different aspect of her work and values. The children's pendant remained one of her most frequently worn pieces, but It had been joined by the military family's brooch, environmental awareness earrings, mental health support bracelet, early childhood development ring, Commonwealth Unity necklace, arts education cufflinks, domestic violence awareness tiara, sustainable fashion statement pins, interfaith dialogue pendant, disability rights brooch, and elder care appreciation earrings. Each piece had its own story, its own collaborating designer, its own debut at a carefully chosen engagement. But, together, they told the comprehensive story of Catherine's approach to royal service, one that emphasized connection, compassion, and commitment to making a real difference in people's lives. "There's someone special here today," Dr. Wright said, gesturing toward the entrance where a young woman with a guide dog was being led through the exhibition by a museum volunteer. Catherine immediately recognized her. Sophie Walsh, a 16-year-old advocate for disability rights whom Catherine had met at a youth leadership conference 6 months earlier. Sophie had been born with a visual impairment, but had become a powerful voice for accessible design and inclusive policies. "Sophie," Catherine called out, moving toward the young woman with genuine delight. Sophie's face lit up at the sound of Catherine's voice. "Your Royal Highness, I can't believe you're here today. I wouldn't miss it. I understand you specifically requested to visit the exhibition today." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "I wanted to experience how the displays have been designed for visitors with visual impairments. I heard that each piece in your collection has detailed audio descriptions and that some pieces are available to touch through specially created replicas." This accessibility feature had been Catherine's idea, inspired by her conversations with Sophie and other advocates. She had worked with the museum design team to ensure that the jewelry exhibition could be experienced by visitors with varying abilities, including detailed audio guides, tactile replicas of selected pieces, and braille descriptions of the symbolism behind each design. "Would you like me to describe the pieces to you as we go through?" Catherine offered. "Actually," Sophie said with a smile, "I'd love to test the accessibility features first, and then hear your personal thoughts about each piece." They moved through the exhibition together, with Sophie using the provided audio guide and tactile elements to experience the collection. Catherine watched with fascination as Sophie ran her fingers over the carefully crafted replicas, understanding the texture and form of each piece in a way that sighted visitors never could. "This is incredible," Sophie said, holding the replica of the disability rights brooch. "I can feel how the designer used different textures to represent different abilities. The smooth areas for some experiences, the raised patterns for others, but all integrated into a cohesive, beautiful design." The disability rights brooch had been one of Catherine's most challenging collaborations. Working with designer Maria Santos, who herself had a physical disability, they had created a piece that celebrated the diversity of human experience while avoiding any suggestion of pity or inspiration porn. The final design featured interlocking elements in different metals, representing how different abilities could work together to create something stronger and more beautiful than any single element alone. Maria, the designer, wanted to create something that showed disability as a natural part of human diversity, Catherine explained. She said that too often, jewelry design around disability focused on overcoming or hiding differences, rather than celebrating them as part of what makes each person unique. Sophie nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly right. And you can feel it in the design. It's confident, beautiful, joyful, not sad or apologetic." As they continued through the exhibition, Catherine found herself seeing her own collection through Sophie's perspective. The young woman's insights about texture, weight, and tactile experience added dimensions to the pieces that Catherine had never fully considered. "Your collection has inspired a lot of young people," Sophie said as they concluded their tour. "My friends and I've been talking about starting a youth jewelry design project, creating pieces that represent the causes we care about. We're calling it Generation Meaningful." This was exactly the kind of impact Catherine had hoped to achieve, inspiring young people to think about their choices as opportunities to express values and support causes they cared about. Later that afternoon, Catherine attended a panel discussion at the center titled, "The Future of Meaningful Jewelry Design." The panel included several designers she had worked with, representatives from ethical gemstone organizations, and young advocates like Sophie who were creating their own values-based jewelry projects. Sarah Chun, who had designed Catherine's first pendant, spoke about how the royal collaboration had changed her entire approach to her work. "Before working with Her Royal Highness, I thought about jewelry in terms of beauty and craftsmanship," Sarah said. "Now I think about every piece as an opportunity to tell a story, to create connection, to support values that matter." The panel discussion revealed that Catherine's approach had influenced jewelry designers around the world. Ethical sourcing had become more prominent in luxury jewelry marketing. Customization services that helped customers incorporate meaningful elements into their pieces had expanded significantly. Several jewelry schools had added courses on symbolic design and values-based craftsmanship. Tom Richardson, who had designed Catherine's environmental awareness pieces, shared data showing increased consumer demand for sustainable and ethical jewelry options. "The royal endorsement of these principles didn't just influence fashion," he explained. "It influenced values." People started asking different questions about where their jewelry came from and what impact their choices had. During the question and answer portion, a young jewelry student asked Catherine what advice she would give to emerging designers who wanted to create meaningful work. Catherine thought carefully before responding. "I would say that authenticity is everything. You can't create meaningful jewelry by following a formula or copying what others have done. You have to start with what genuinely matters to you, what values you want to express, what connections you want to create. The meaning has to be real for the maker before it can be real for the wearer." She paused, looking around at the audience of designers, students, and jewelry enthusiasts. "I also learned that you don't have to choose between beauty and meaning. The most powerful pieces are those that work on multiple levels. They're stunning as pure craftsmanship, but they also carry deeper significance for those who want to discover it." As the panel concluded, Catherine was approached by Dr. James Morrison, a cultural anthropologist who had been studying the social impact of her signature collection. "Your Royal Highness, I wonder if you realize the broader cultural shift you've influenced?" Catherine looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Our research shows that your approach to jewelry has influenced how people think about consumption more broadly. We're seeing increased interest in what we call meaningful materialism, the idea that our possessions should reflect our values and tell our stories. People are buying fewer things, but choosing more carefully, prioritizing items with personal or social significance." This was a profound outcome that Catherine hadn't anticipated. The idea that her personal journey toward more meaningful jewelry choices could contribute to broader cultural conversations about consumption and values felt like a remarkable validation of the project's importance. That evening, Catherine and William hosted a private dinner at Kensington Palace for the designers, advocates, and cultural leaders who had participated in the day's events. As they sat around the dining table, Catherine wore several pieces from her collection: the children's pendant, the environmental awareness earrings, and the Commonwealth Unity necklace. "I keep thinking about something Sophie said today," Catherine shared with the group, "about how the tactile experience of jewelry adds meaning that those of us who are sighted often miss. It made me realize how many dimensions of significance we're still discovering." Emma Harrison, her original stylist who had become more of a creative collaborator and friend, raised her glass. "To Catherine, for showing us that tradition and innovation don't have to be opposites. For proving that royal service can be both deeply personal and broadly meaningful." As the evening continued, the conversation turned to future possibilities. Several international royal families had expressed interest in adopting similar approaches to their jewelry choices. Fashion schools were developing curricula around meaningful design. Even corporate jewelry brands were exploring how to incorporate more authentic storytelling into their collections. "What's next for your collection?" asked Maria Santos, the disability rights brooch designer. Catherine smiled, touching the pendant at her throat. I think the collection will keep evolving as my understanding of royal service evolves. There are causes I haven't addressed yet, communities I haven't connected with, stories I haven't told. But more importantly, I hope it continues to inspire other people, royal and non-royal alike, to think about their choices as opportunities to express their values. Later that night, as Catherine prepared for bed, she stood once again in front of her dressing room mirror. But this time the experience was entirely different from that transformative morning 18 months earlier. Instead of feeling disconnected from her jewelry collection, she felt deeply connected to every piece. Each item told a story, not just of beautiful craftsmanship or historical significance, but of her journey to find authentic ways to serve, to connect, to make a difference. The collection had become a visual representation of her values, a tool for communication, and a source of personal strength. Emma helped her remove the day's jewelry, placing each piece carefully in its designated spot in the newly organized collection. Where once the arrangement had been based primarily on historical importance or frequency of use, it was now organized by the values each piece represented and the stories it told. You know, Emma said as they finished, I think Queen Elizabeth would be proud of what you've created here. Catherine picked up the aquamarine necklace that the late Queen had left specifically for her, the piece that represented thoughtful leadership and calm authority. She had worn it to some of her most challenging engagements, drawing strength from its history and significance. I think so too, Catherine said softly. Not because I've created something revolutionary, but because I found a way to honor tradition while expressing my authentic self. That balance between duty and authenticity, between history and innovation, I think that's what she always wanted for all of us. As Catherine settled into bed, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with her desire to feel more connected to her jewelry choices. The signature collection had become much more than a fashion project. It had become a new model for how public figures could use their platforms to advocate for values, support causes, and create meaningful connections with the people they served. More importantly, it had become a source of personal fulfillment and authentic self-expression. When Catherine wore her jewelry now, she wasn't just fulfilling a protocol or meeting an expectation. She was telling her story, sharing her values, and contributing to conversations that mattered deeply to her. The collection would continue to grow and evolve, adding new pieces as Catherine's work expanded into new areas and as her understanding of her role deepened. But the foundation had been established, a commitment to authenticity, meaning, and service that would guide all her future choices. As she drifted off to sleep, Catherine smiled, thinking about Sophie's generation meaningful project and all the young people who were being inspired to think differently about the relationship between objects and values. The signature collection had become the beginning of something much larger, a movement toward more thoughtful consumption, more authentic self-expression, and more meaningful ways of using privilege and platform for positive impact. The jewelry that had once felt like a burden now felt like a bridge, connecting past and future, tradition and innovation, duty and authenticity. And in finding that balance, Catherine had discovered not just her own voice, but a new way of thinking about royal service that could inspire future generations of leaders to use their platforms with intention, creativity, and genuine commitment to making the world a better place.